Hello, my name is Dr. Bryce Call. I am the Assistant Professor of Trumpet here at Washburn University. Today, we'll be playing through some of the audition music for the KMEA All-State Trumpet Audition. The first excerpt is from Gustav Holst's Second Suite, the Song Without Words. It's important with this one to kick out on the low D for your first note. Otherwise, the D is going to be a bit sharp. So be sure to kick out and play it nice and in tune. This excerpt is a great opportunity to show your musical phrasing and express your dynamics with your best sound. I prefer to breathe in 4-bar phrases, so I'll play the first 4 measures, take a short breath after the dotted half note, and then the next 4 measures. I also like to add a little bit more dynamics than are written. We really only have the mezzo piano at the beginning, and we can be much more expressive with that throughout the whole excerpt. Watch out for the high Gs on top of the staff, as those tend to be sharp on the trumpet, so you want to lip those down to keep those in tune. Be sure to put a little bit of a ritardando as you lead up to the fermata near the end of the excerpt. Feel free to take a breath after the fermata and quiet down as you finish the excerpt. The trumpet solo from Percy Grainger's Lincolnshire Posy is another excellent time for you to demonstrate your musical phrasing with your best sound and vibrato. This is a time where the music is paused for a moment and the trumpet solo gets to be a little bit more exposed. So take your time, like it says, slowly flowing, singingly. You want this to sound like you're singing through the horn. We only have a couple dynamic indications: mezzo piano, a crescendo to forte, and a decrescendo. But you can be much more expressive than just this. As you go through the music, use the arc of the register to build your musical phrase. Get louder as you move through, and then get softer as you come to an end. I really only take a breath after the first line, because for 5 beats, when you have the C on the second line tied over to the 3/4 bar, you're going to be crescendoing like you've never crescendoed in your life. This has to be your best, most suspenseful crescendo you've ever done, without a breath as you lead to the downbeat of the next measure. So I play the first line in one phrase, take a nice big full breath to prepare me to play the next 2 lines. I get through the crescendo. Be sure to keep time throughout that and build the suspense, draw the listener in as you drive it home to the forte on the downbeat of the next line. After that phrase, you can take a breath before the 3/2 bar and bring the dynamic down a little bit to end the excerpt. The most challenging thing about Hindemith's Symphony in B-flat, the opening trumpet excerpt, is time. It can be very difficult to keep this excerpt from dragging or rushing or changing the rhythm in some way. I like to imagine that I'm playing this with the band, it helps me from overblowing when I imagine that I'm playing this in unison with a whole trumpet section. So listen to recordings of this so that you know how the band parts go, because you start off with just a whole note. And I want to keep that time. I'm imagining ba-ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-ba-bum at the beginning. And I keep this steady tempo in 3/2 the whole way through. Make sure that you practice this with the metronome so that every movement is right in time. Again, you're going to want to play this with a big, full sound without overblowing. You don't need to be aggressive with this, but try to fill up the room that you're playing in. If you can do this excerpt in one breath, that's great. You may need to sneak in a couple breaths because you're going to be playing this at a loud volume. And it can be difficult to sneak that breath in without losing time. I prefer to sneak in a breath before the 4th measure when I'm going from the A flat to the G. A quick breath in time. I can also sneak one in before the 2nd line when I'm between the D and the G in the triplet of the 1st measure and the 2nd line. Once you get to the last line of the excerpt, there you shouldn't be doing any breathing. Everything should be moving forward to the end. The crescendos from the F to the G on top of the staff might sound a little wah-y. It might sound like it has this wah effect. In order to get rid of that, imagine that you are crescendoing, getting louder from those notes, building to the G on top of the staff. That is your landing point. Ralph Vaughan Williams' Folk Song Suite is another fun piece of music to play. The hardest part about this excerpt, I think, is capturing the right musical characteristic without having it sound boring or notey. It is to be kept quiet, but make sure that it's not too quiet that the tone suffers. You want it to be a nice, full, pure sound. I like to think of this as a pretty march. So the time is strict and in tempo, moving along like you're marching, but with a pretty sound. Nice, light, crisp articulations on the staccatos, contrasted with the smooth slurs. It also helps to put a little bit of weight on the downbeats of all the slurs. Bum-be-yum, bum-bum-bum, bum-be-yum, bum-bum-bum. That can help give it a little bit more of that march-like feel with your pretty sound. Etude number 36 from 40 Studies by Wurm is another opportunity for you to demonstrate your best sound at a quiet volume. You don't feel like you need to play at your quietest volume. Even though it says piano, you can still stretch within that, getting louder and softer. The more dynamic contrast you have, the more expressive your music will be. This is also a great chance for you to experiment with the type of vibrato that you want to use, whether it be a little bit faster or slower. Find what you like best and use that to express the music. As you work out the 16th note rhythms, be sure not to rush through that. Practice with a metronome so that you keep everything nice and in time. Slam the fingers down to train the muscles to move as they should, and everything will work out well. When you get to the trill on the low D, I prefer to trill from the D to the E with third valve. That makes the trill much easier. If you're going to make this an actual trill with more movement back and forth, you'll need to slow down the tempo in a musical way. So when you get to that measure, do a little ritardando before moving on with the rest of the tempo. Otherwise, you can make the trill sound more like a turn. When you're approaching the high A on the third line, be sure to give it a nice crescendo so that your air can support reaching up to the higher note. And as you go lower down to the F sharp on the last line, be sure not to relax your embouchure too much. You want it to be slow, supported air with the embouchure set as if you were playing in the mid to upper register so that the tone can match across the registers of the horn. Arban's characteristic studies number 1 is a fun excerpt to play. Be sure not to play too loud because it is important for you to get through as much of this as you can in one breath. If you're able to get through the entire excerpt in one breath, that's great. If not, there are a couple of options that you can use to sneak in a breath. Be sure not to play too loud and play it at the fastest tempo that you can, still cleanly and without missing notes, so that you are pacing yourself and preserving your air. Keep your articulations light and crisp. We don't want the slurs to sound like they're cut off. We want every note to flow into the next, even though they're separated. Be sure to keep time during the trills. You don't want to rush or drag or cheat the note in any way. Make sure the time is moving forward. So practice this with a metronome and make sure your trills are kept in time with that metronome. I prefer to put a little bit of a landing spot right before I move on from the trill in time. If you do need to breathe, the best place to do it is after the first eighth note C on the downbeat of the second line. There's also a spot that you could put a breath on the third line after the first measure. In order to do this well without missing any notes from breathing, I put a little bit of a ritardando. I slow down at the end of that measure so that my breath sounds musical, and then I pick up the tempo in the very next measure. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Dr. Bryce Call, the Assistant Professor of Trumpet here at Washburn University. I hope some of this has been helpful for you. If you would like or are interested in private lessons, feel free to reach out to me using the contact information in the video description below.